Hello and welcome to our channel. We're the Lorcana Twins, and we're back this week to talk about the latest news about Disney Lorcana.
It's been rather a slow week for new news about the game, but we at least have gotten a new card reveal in the name of Goofy. So today we will be touching on the new Goofy card and then discussing the evasive keyword in the game and doing kind of an analysis on the cards that have evasive so far and how we think that might play out.
Yeah, so we'll just get right into it. Goofy was revealed today. He is a 5-cost Ruby Ink character with 3 strength and 4 defense, and he's a Dreamborn hero, and he has evasive as his keyword. So he's the 3rd Ruby character we've seen with evasive. And just a quick point out, when he was revealed, the lore amount that he has was concealed. So again, we're not sure how many lore we will be working with, but for now we can just speculate about that.
Yes, I think 2 is probably a good guess just based on the cost of this card. If it was only worth 1, you'd probably never want to use this Goofy. But if
Right.
it was 3, I think that'd be way too much lore for for this cost of 5.
Right,
So
and then
2 seems kind of like the sweet spot, but that'll be revealed later.
yeah, if he had 3, I mean Mickey has 4 for a cost of 8, which we'll see pretty soon. And so yeah, I think 3 for 5 would be too much, and especially when you consider the fact that he's got the evasive keyword, which could make him harder to deal with. So yeah, I mean, so far Goofy's looking pretty cool. He's skydiving in there, looks like he's having a good time.
Yep, they went with the red outfit for him, which matches the ruby color of the card, and also the mountain range. There's a bit of a ruby glow kind of atop those mountains, and as other people have pointed out, the ruby art tends to have some jagged lines. So in this card, that's kind of being accomplished with the mountain range peaks, and then some of the lines in Goofy's outfit as well are a little bit sharp.
Right, like in the Mulan card, which we've seen before, that looks like it also has some jagged mountains behind her, so it's definitely a consistent theme. And I don't know, I think, Goofy looks like he's having a great time being a daredevil, not too scared, and looks like he's losing his hat though, so might have a hard time getting that back. But I'm sure he's not thinking about that.
Yeah, now stat-wise, like most of the evasive cards, it kind of seems that you get weak stats for the cost of the card because the wardrobe costs 3, and the wardrobe is a 3 power 4 defense card, just like Goofy.
Right, same stats.
But Goofy costs 5 for the same stat line, the only difference being he has evasive. So, if you're trying to win the board, and in an early game setup, the wardrobe definitely seems stronger in that way because you can get her out much earlier to kind of deal with your opponent's early game threats. The only difference being, the evasive factor. But if you're using wardrobe, you're probably using her for the challenge. We think she'll probably have like 1 lore, most likely, because she's already got great stats for the cost. So if she had 2 lore, it might be just hard for other things to deal with her efficiently enough.
So yeah, if you're playing evasive units, we really feel like it seems like you're playing it for the lore gaining potential, which again is what we think the win condition will be, is collecting a certain amount of lore or collecting more than your opponent in a certain amount of time. So, but now yeah, we'll take a look at the rest of the evasive units that have been revealed to date.
So Tigger, he's another one that we recently saw. He's 1 cost more than Goofy, and the only difference in the stat line is he gets 1 additional strength. So then the question becomes, is he going to have different lore than Goofy? And if we assume Goofy is 2, then at best Tigger could have 3, maybe.
I'm just wondering if they
is
both
that too
had
strong to have 3? I
yeah, I
don't
mean,
know.
if they both had 2 lore, then would one of them not see any play or not see much play? Or would would Tigger require like an extra lore over Goofy for people to want to play him? Because if you're not playing it for the combat, and you could get the same amount of lore out of them, you might want to just stick with the Goofy because you can get him out presumably a turn earlier. But I don't know. I mean, I guess in a different case, you could also use your evasive units to try to get a couple trades out of some of your opponent's smaller characters, but that's definitely not the main purpose, we think, with
Right, because
evasive.
the cost is so prohibitive for that. I think by the time you get this Tigger out, let's say, you're going to want to get lore with him. Because if you just wanted to clear the board, you'd probably want to play a cheaper cost card that has better stats. But
Right.
It's interesting too when you look at Robin Hood. Robin Hood also costs 6 like Tigger. They have the same stat line, but Robin Hood has two effects, and Tigger only has the one. Of course, Robin Hood's his first effect. It doesn't always trigger. It'll only trigger if your opponent has more cards than you. And then the good shot ability. You're only getting evasive half the time. So after you've challenged, like while you're on defense, essentially, he's just sitting there vulnerable, whereas Tigger is only vulnerable to other evasive characters or actions. So it'll just be really interesting to see like how the lore comes in here, because Robin Hood has more effects and has 2 lore. Will Tigger have a 3rd lore, or are some of Robin Hood's effects being factored in based on that he's super rare, or are they not taking rarities into account at all? And then, what is the value of evasive all the time versus evasive half of the time?
Right.
I think another thing about Goofy, too, is one reason to maybe play Tigger over Goofy if they have the same lore is that if you're worried about Robin Hoods, Robin Hood will cleanly get rid of Goofy and still survive.
Sure.
Whereas Tigger will also take Robin Hood out at the same time. So, that makes Tigger a little more combat focused over the Goofy, but again, it's an extra resource investment for Tigger.
Yeah, I think we're just missing the piece of the puzzle, like being able to see how much lore they're worth.
I think the lore is the big thing.
And once we know that, we'll see a lot more about how the cards are balanced. I mean, looking at Mickey, he's the most expensive costed evasive unit so far, and he is compensated for that with that 4 lore, which is the most that we've seen on any character. So he does seem like if you can't deal with their evasive units, I mean, that 4 lore could be a big problem for the opponent. So also, I mean, he's 2 costed higher than Tigger, and
I think with him the key factor is his stat line too, the 5 defense.
Right. We've yet to see an evasive unit that could take out Mickey Mouse in one go. So that might be the reason why he is a legendary and 8 costed for a 5/5 stat line. But
I wouldn't be surprised too if there's an evasive character that has 5 power that isn't Mickey.
Right, we've still just seen a very small portion of the total cards in the set. So
and they could do very different things with the stat lines too. Like maybe you have a 5/2, like a 5 power 2 defense.
Sure, and it costs less.
It's very vulnerable to spells that do like a little bit of damage, let's say. But the upside of that is that it could take out a big unit like Mickey. So it will be interesting to see, just how many other evasive cards there are. And
yeah, the other thing that's interesting is, so far we've seen 6 Ruby cards, I believe, and half of them have evasive, but there's still so many Ruby cards yet to be revealed. So I'm wondering if we're going to see a lot more evasive units that are still hiding out there waiting to be revealed, or if there are going to be, multiple different archetypes and deck styles you could build out using Ruby cards. So, and again, we haven't seen in the other inks either any evasives except Robin Hood, who's partially evasive, I guess you could say. So it'll be curious to see if it is heavily skewed toward Ruby, or if some other inks will also have a bunch of evasive characters. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, I think it's possible to maybe they'll have certain keywords across different colors. Like here, Robin Hood does get it situationally. But, evasive so far seems to be like the primary type is usually Ruby. So I'm imagining they're going to get the bulk of the other evasive cards. And, maybe 30% of the Ruby characters will have evasive, or 40, who knows? I kind of doubt they'd want to make a majority have this.
Right. It seems like maybe they're just revealing a lot of evasives because we don't know the full rules yet, and so it's not spoiling anything else yet before they announce the rules to keep showing evasive characters, since we've seen the keyword before. So there could be a decent chunk of Ruby cards that do not, focus around the evasive keyword.
Yeah, I think a fun thing to do with Ruby, and what I would maybe lean more towards right now, although we have so few cards, it's hard to say, but would be to maybe build a deck where you focus on winning the board, and then including a few copies of some high-end evasive characters like Mickey, where if you do have a great setup, then it'll feel really nice to drop him on board and then start going for lore every turn.
Right,
especially. But I wouldn't want to make the bulk of my deck underpowered minions that can't win the board, and essentially just say, I'm just kind of playing against the clock. Can I get enough lore before they run me down with a stronger board?
Yeah, because the interesting thing is if you're playing a bunch of evasive units and your opponent is not, and they can't really challenge any of your units, then they'll probably just be sending their units on quests for lore too. And if they race you to that win condition, and all of a sudden, you're behind somehow, and you realize, you need to start trading some of your units out, but their stats are way better, and they just don't stack up. That would not feel good to get into that scenario. So yeah, I like the idea of kind of trying to have a decent board going and control that and make them burn all their removal, as you go through the game, and then you maybe ramp up to like a Mickey Mouse in the late game. And then, once they've used all the removal, you can start collecting 4 lore off of him per turn, however that might work. So
yeah,
I like that sound.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be, evasive maybe sounds a little scary right now, and we haven't seen a ton of ways to deal with it, but I'm sure there's, going to be different options for players to include in their decks to handle this keyword. And so, if you find like you're against a deck that has a lot of counters to you, and then if you can't win the board because your minions are understated, I think that would be a problem. So I think there's going to be a healthy balance of, evasive versus non-evasive characters to include in your deck, and if you are going for that type of a build. But yeah, we need to see a lot more of the rest of the set first before we can see how extensive evasive is going to be. But
it seems like
they can be targeted by actions, and there's going to be a lot of actions, and there'll probably be some bounce back to hand effects and different things that can deal with this. So I think it's not going to be as scary as it maybe looks initially.
Now a good synergy with evasive seems to be the ward mechanic. So let's say you play Aurora and you have a board full of evasive units. Now they can't be targeted with actions or with abilities on characters, so the only way to get rid of them would be to challenge them. And if your opponent doesn't have any evasive units, they won't be able to challenge. Then you could maybe run away with the game and just score a bunch of lore really quick with little counterplay. So yeah, that's something to look out for.
I think Aurora's just gonna be one of those cards where as soon as you see it come down on the field, you're gonna want to handle it quickly, just so that your options aren't so limited later on when they start playing evasive characters or playing characters with strong effects that you want to get rid of, and suddenly find that you can't. So I think she's just one of those, like, she'll have a target on her back as soon as she, gets played down. But
yep. And then I guess whether or not other ink colors get a bunch of evasive characters or not, maybe it's more limited to Ruby, then I'm sure each ink will have some way to deal with the evasive mechanic, I would imagine, so that there's, some chance, no matter what deck you're playing.
Yeah, and even if it's just actions, that target a character.
Right. Or
possibly, effects that give you evasive, or maybe effects that make an enemy character like lose its keywords for the turn, or whatever it might be. I think there will be options.
But that will be about it for now. But before we go, we thought we'd ask one trivia question to test some of your Disney knowledge. So we have a quote for you, and the question is, which Disney film does it come from? So what is the quote?
Yes, why don't you share the quote with everybody?
All right, it is, "Somebody call IXII." So if you know what that film or what that quote is from, leave the film in the comments and we will reply if you're correct. And other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next video.
Yes, thanks everyone.